This is Journey to Chinese Fluency Podcast, episode number 14.
Embarrassing moment, culture insights, proven methods to achieve Chinese fluency. Skip that learning curve with the Journey to Chinese Fluency Podcast. Now, your host, Victor Yang.
Hello everyone, Victor Yang here and welcome to Journey to Chinese Fluency. Today I'm joined by Tristan McCarthy. His Chinese name is Ma Tan. Tristan was born in Launceston, Tasmania, Australia, and he lived in Melbourne for the last 5 years. Tristan speaks English natively and Mandarin Chinese. He started learning Chinese since 2013, and now at the age of 24, he is studying Aerospace Engineering. Here's one interesting fact about Tristan. He won the second place in Oceania in the 2016 Chinese Bridge competition. 你好 Tristan, welcome to the show.
你好 Victor, great to join you.
Are you ready to share with us your journey to Chinese fluency?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Awesome. So first of all, please help us fill in the blank a bit for the introduction.
Okay, so like you said, I was born and raised in Tasmania. I did all my primary school and high school there, and I decided sort of during high school that I really wanted to get into aviation. I did a bit of flying at the local airport. You know, during the last sort of couple of years of high school, I decided to combine my interest in engineering with aviation, and I moved to Melbourne to study aerospace engineering. And I've just a couple months ago completed that degree, and I'm looking for work at the moment.
Cool. So please share with our listeners, why did you learn Chinese?
Good question, actually, because in high school I had no interest at all in learning any foreign languages. I thought it was sort of a waste of time because of the opportunity cost. I thought that my time would be better spent on learning other things, so like science and maths was my area of interest. But in 2011, in my year 12, I was lucky enough to go to Russia on a school trip. I found that I really enjoyed picking up words in Russian and learning about the language and the different alphabet. And when I came back, it was kind of this thought in my head that I wouldn't mind learning a language one day. And after moving to Melbourne in the year later for university, I lived at the residential college at the university, and there were people from all around the world, literally North America, South America, Europe, lots of people from Asia, and a lot of people who could speak Mandarin. So I started picking up little phrases here and there in Mandarin and also Cantonese. And so I started to get the idea of enrolling in a diploma of language. And I was tossing up between Russian and Mandarin at first, but I settled on Mandarin because I thought it would be much more useful in the future. And there's so many people I could speak with in Mandarin in Australia, but I couldn't think of any Russians in Australia to speak with. So that kind of made up the decision for me. And 1 year later, I started a diploma in Mandarin.
Wow, that's interesting. So did you start learning Mandarin Chinese after you went to the uni?
Yep. So before that, in high school, the only Chinese word I knew would have been ni hao. And I wasn't even sure if that was Mandarin or Cantonese or anything. I really had no idea about the Chinese language at all.
I see. So during your study in aerospace engineering, and then you just took the Chinese course?
Yep, that's right. So I converted my full-time study of engineering into 3 units, so 3 quarters engineering and then 1 quarter Mandarin for the next 2.5 years of my degree until I completed the diploma.
Wow. So what has been your biggest motivation apart from just wanting to learn language?
When I started, I just found it like a real challenge and really interesting. I think sometimes I find that I'm interested in something as a challenge and I just get completely into it. In high school, I learnt the Rubik's Cube and that wasn't enough, so I learnt the Rubik's Cube blindfolded. And
Nice.
I think it was the same sort of thing with Mandarin initially. It was just a real challenge because it's supposedly one of the hardest languages to learn, and I just found it really enjoyable. So I thought, why not get into it and make the most of it?
Right. So basically to challenge yourself at the same time.
Yeah, and the more I got into it, the more rewarding I found it to be able to converse with other people in a different language. And that was the motivation to continue. Like, there's a lot of Chinese people in Melbourne. So in Clayton, where I lived next to the university, I'd go to the Asian supermarket, and even just being able to say thank you, everyone at the supermarket would get really excited, the fact that I could say just that simple word, and that was really motivating, having that encouragement all the time.
Yeah, definitely. So now please share with us your method of learning Chinese. So what's been the most effective technique or method that's been working for you?
The techniques for me have changed a lot over time. At the start, the most important thing was for me to focus on one character at a time and maybe sort of write it out 30 times over and over, which was kind of meditative, and it gave me time to let the stroke order and the image of the character sink in. And while I was writing it out, I was kind of repeating it over and over in my head. So I'd get the sound, the pinyin, the tone, everything kind of down pat for that one character, and then I'd move on to the next one. So that was how I started out. I was also really focused on tones at the start. I had a friend who gave me a really good way to pronounce each tone, and because of that friend, I pretty much got it almost straight away.
So what exactly did your friend teach you?
So I had a friend who, I was struggling like everyone does with the tones at first, but I had a friend who gave me a bit of a technique on how to pronounce each tone. So basically they taught me that the first tone is as if you're singing. So it's like a high tone, like la, like that would be the first tone. The second tone is kind of like you're a bit unsure, like you're kind of doubting something, like what? Like that in English, like ma.
Yep.
And the third tone, which I found the hardest, is kind of, she described it as keeping the sound in your throat. So I kind of imagine it like you go to the dentist and the dentist says, like, keep your mouth open and say ah, and it kind of sounds like ah, like that, like kind of keep the sound in your throat, like let it go down and up a little bit, like ma.
Yep.
And the fourth tone, it's kind of like you're angry, like no, like you're really sharp and straight to the point. So and then I just kind of practiced that over and over until everyone I asked was sure that I was saying it properly, and didn't have any trouble with tones after that at all.
Nice. That's a good start.
Yeah, that's a good start for sure. More recently, my challenge has been to improve my reading comprehension and speed. So like I said, the techniques kind of change over time, but later on flashcards become much more important. Being able to recognize that character really quickly as soon as you see it. Otherwise, it's really difficult to read long sentences.
Right. So how do you practice that?
So what I did is I downloaded I found like a website online, and I downloaded the top 5,000 most common characters. And I wouldn't pretend that I know all of them at the moment, but I put them in order of most common down to the least common, and kind of just work through, practice each character sort of in the top 2,000, and just kind of test myself on that, like make flashcards, and as soon as I see that character, I want to be able to recognize it straight away. If I don't, then I mark that as incorrect. So I'm using the Pleco software, which is an app on like your smartphone. You can get on Android or Apple, and you can create flashcards. So if I get one wrong or I'm not fast enough, I just mark it as incorrect, and that card will come up more often.
Right. Even you are not fast enough, you will mark it as wrong.
Yeah, that's right. Because you can mark it from it's not a pass fail. You can mark yourself as like, oh, that was completely easy, or oh, like that was all right, but I kind of forgot a little bit. Or you can say, I almost remembered that one. Or you can say like, I had no idea and I got it completely wrong. So it gives you the option for that.
I see. But being tough on yourself definitely helps you to get better.
Yeah, that's right. One of my challenges is to read a novel in Chinese. I've read some short books in Chinese before, but I've never read like a proper novel in Chinese, and I think that would help a lot. I wouldn't necessarily understand everything, but even just skipping over the words that you're not sure of, I imagine I'd improve my comprehension and speed really quickly.
How did you practice your listening skills?
Good question. Because at the start, I found that after doing sort of 6-8 months of Mandarin, I was great at starting conversations, but people would then respond and I'd have no idea what they were talking about. Even though they were often using words that I'd learnt before, I couldn't pick them out. And then the other words that I hadn't learnt before, it just put me completely off and I had no idea what they were talking about. And the only way I really got around that was complete immersion. I applied for a scholarship called the Huayu Enrichment Scholarship. It's a scholarship provided by the Taiwan Ministry of Education. They basically pay you around, I think it's $800 a month to move to Taiwan and study. So I applied for that literally a few weeks after enrolling in my Chinese course, and I was actually successful. So after learning 1 year of Mandarin, I moved over to Taiwan, and within a few weeks, my listening ability had improved magnitudes, sort of literally a few 100%. And I was able to have reasonably fluent conversations.
How long did that take?
Literally, when I first got to Taiwan, I was still struggling to understand what people were saying to me. But after, even 3 weeks, I could see a significant improvement. And by the end of the 3 months that I spent there, I was improving at a really fast rate, just week to week.
What is the name of the program again? Is it called Huayu Enrichment Program, was it?
Yeah, it's called the Huayu Enrichment Scholarship, otherwise known as HES. I can provide the details so listeners can find that online because it's a really good scholarship. You can choose pretty much any university in Taiwan, whichever one you'd like, and then move there and study for up to 12 months.
Cool. So this scholarship is offered by Taiwan.
Yep.
That's interesting. Great. So to our listeners, if you would like to take the opportunity, go for it.
Yeah. I'm sure there are similar programs for mainland China as well. But I heard it from my Chinese professor in the first few weeks of starting that university course. He mentioned that there was this opportunity and I thought, I might as well apply for it. And then after just a few weeks, I heard back that I was successful. And I think that it's not too hard to get. So I would really recommend that one, even if you're a complete beginner with, you've never even started in the class before. I'd still recommend giving it a go because I think they value your interest rather than your skill at the present.
Right.
So, yeah, that was a really good opportunity.
Cool. So what kind of schedule were you on when you just started learning Chinese?
So in Australia, when I started the diploma, we would have one lecture a week for 2 hours, and then we'd have a 1 hour tutorial where we'd focus on sort of characters and the history of the characters, and then another 1 hour tutorial where we'd focus on reading and speaking. So 4 hours a week, and then probably around 4 to 6 hours of self-study as well per week.
I see.
After moving to Taiwan for that, I moved there for 3 months over the summer break so for Australia, that's December to around March. So I moved to Taiwan for that 3.5 month period. And I deliberately chose the earliest class, the 8 a.m. till 10 a.m. class each day, which gave me the rest of the day to get out and enjoy the city and experience living in Taiwan during the day.
Which part of Taiwan did you go to? Was it Taipei?
Yeah, I was staying in Taipei, and the university was the National University, or National Taiwan Normal University. and they have a Mandarin training center. In Mandarin, it's 国立台湾师范大学
Okay.
国语教学中心, and it's recognized as one of the best places to learn Mandarin, at least in Taiwan, which I can agree with.
If you are to start learning Chinese all over again, what would you do?
I think I had a really good start, like a real fast start to learning Mandarin. I don't know if I would really change anything, to be honest. Maybe in sort of my second and third years, I'd try to sort of keep ahead of the class, because I found that it got sort of harder and harder as the grammar, the grammar became a bit harder. But to start with, I had a really great teacher, had really great tutorial class leaders, and the techniques that I described worked really well for me. So I don't think I'd change anything about that, to be honest.
That's great. Great to hear. So you went to the Chinese bridge competition. Maybe you can share with us a bit about that.
Yep. Yeah. So I had a teacher approach me at the university who mentioned the competition and said that it might be something I'd be interested in. I had a bit of a look into it and realized that the people who participated were sort of performing songs and dancing as part of the competition, as well as giving a speech. And I'd never been any good at singing or dancing, so I kind of told the teacher, it looks interesting, but it's not really for me. So I didn't end up entering the competition that year. That was 2015.
Right.
And I went and watched the competition, and it was really interesting, but I thought, I can't do what they're doing because I can't sing, I can't dance, I can't really, do anything like that. So, but my teacher kept saying, oh, no, it'll be really good. Think about it a bit more and see what you think. And the next year, so 2016, I was thinking of other things I could do, and my teacher gave me the idea of presenting a poem. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, yeah, that's something I could do. Anyone can present a poem. So I got thinking about it, and ended up choosing an ancient Chinese poem, and presented that as well as a speech in the Melbourne competition. And I came second there. And my friend, actually also from the same university as me, came first. And we both were selected to go to China for the main competition, which was mid last year.
Nice. I actually watched the video of you saying the poem, so that was pretty impressive, actually.
Oh, thank you, Victor.
Yeah, I'll actually link that on our show notes. To our listeners, if you are interested to watch Tristan saying that Chinese poem, you can just visit our show note page.
Yeah.
So, what have been your biggest challenge in learning Chinese, and how did you overcome that?
One of the biggest challenges we spoke about already was the listening skills. I used to find it really frustrating being able to start a conversation but not be able to understand the response. So I think the takeaway there is to not be too discouraged. It took me 1 year and it took me 3 months living in Taiwan to really get that listening ability. So I guess the advice there is, if you're serious about learning Mandarin, you've got to be patient at the start, and you've got to take the opportunity to move over to, somewhere like China or, anywhere where they speak Mandarin, even like Singapore, and really get that exposure to the language. Otherwise, it is really hard to do it in a non-Chinese speaking country. You can surround yourself with lots of Chinese friends, and that will help, but to really get the exposure, you've got to fully immerse yourself, I think. It got to the point where I started to forget some English words, and actually
Right.
For the Chinese bridge competition, after the Melbourne competition and going over to China, the whole process in China was about 5 to 6 weeks. We had sort of our round one, and most people were knocked out, and then we had a few weeks for round two, and then a few more people were knocked out, and the final, by the time we got to the grand final, I remember being interviewed, and they asked me to say something what I thought about the city in Chinese and then say the same thing in English. And I actually found it was harder to describe it in English because I hadn't spoke English for, the previous 6 weeks. And
Wow.
same sort of thing happened in Taiwan. There were other foreigners there, but I deliberately kind of, wouldn't say I avoided them, but I really tried to make as many local friends as possible. And even with like my Australian friends over there, I was trying to speak Mandarin mostly with them as well. Got to the point where I was also dreaming in Chinese, that was a big thing. I remember waking up sort of probably 2 months into living in Taiwan and woke up one day and realized that I'd had my first dream in Chinese. And that was a pretty interesting thing for me.
Awesome. Did you talk in Mandarin Chinese in your dream?
That's right, yeah.
Cool. During your stay in China, did you have to deal with any accents or dialects?
It's interesting. Yeah, definitely. Every part of China has a little bit different accent. And so for me, my first experience was the one in Taiwan, and I found the accent really easy to understand. And I got used to that. And when I went to mainland China for the first time in Sichuan, I found it much harder to understand what they were saying because they're speaking Mandarin, but they've got a bit of an accent, and they've also got sort of the local dialect influence. So they kind of mix up some of the sounds like L and N.
Right.
And sometimes sort of S and SH get a bit mixed up as well. So for me, that was quite difficult. But eventually, if you spend enough time in one area, you do pick up the accent and you get used to it. But the next time I went to China, I went all the way from the southern border with Vietnam up to Shenyang, which is sort of northeast of Beijing. So I kind of got exposed to a lot of different accents along the way. And actually, I'd say that the Beijing accent is actually quite difficult to understand. Not just because of the R, the R Huaiyin, but also just the way that they kind of jam all the words together and slow them into one big kind of phrase. Yeah. It's actually, I find that quite difficult. Whereas
that's true.
I feel like in Taiwan, they kind of pronounce every character like much clearer.
Very explicitly.
Like, 你最近怎么样? Like that. Whereas in Beijing, like I probably can't do the accent that well, but
你最近怎么样?
Like kind of jammed together.
That's right. One example I can give is there is a very popular Chinese dish, which is basically fried egg with tomato.
Yep.
In Taiwan, they say 番茄炒蛋. Okay, 番茄 is the very formal name for tomato.
Yep.
And 炒, which means fry, 蛋, which is egg. And another word for 蛋 is actually 鸡蛋, which is a chicken egg. Yeah. In Beijing, we say 西红柿炒鸡蛋. So 西红柿, which is tomato, instead of saying instead of 番茄 in Beijing, people say 西红柿. That's just a more spoken way to say tomato. And 炒 is the same as Taiwan, and then Taiwan say 蛋, but in Beijing we say 鸡蛋, right? So that's quite different, isn't it?
Yeah.
Exactly same Chinese dish. If you go to Taiwan, people say 番茄炒蛋. They just literally say that, 番茄炒蛋. Very clear, very explicit. But in Beijing, people get lazy. People don't say 西红柿炒鸡蛋. They don't say that long, it's too long. People like to shorten things in Beijing. So we say 西红柿炒鸡蛋. So 西红柿 becomes 西红柿.
Yeah, and a lot of the words, like sort of the 2-character words become one character plus the R. So
yep.
I think
that's true.
An easy example would be like 明天, like tomorrow. They just say mirror.
That's right.
So I mean I think that as far as I know, that's really only in Beijing or maybe some areas around Beijing up in the northeast. Nowhere else in China that I know of would say it like that.
Yeah, that's actually quite Beijing. Mirror.
Yeah. Other differences I've noticed between Taiwan and the mainland as well. Obviously, there's the traditional characters that they use in Taiwan and Hong Kong, and I think Alman is in Macau as well. Alman. But apart from just the characters, it's also and the accent. I noticed that Taiwan people pronounce the tones on both words. So if you've got a 2-character word, I can't think of a good example right now, but they would pronounce both the tones on the first character and the second character. Whereas in the mainland, often the second character will have a neutral tone.
Ah, yes. Have
you noticed that?
There's quite, I definitely know that. For example, if you want to say, I'm full, in mainland China, we say, 我吃饱了, 我吃饱了. The L is lightly pronounced, or you can call it a neutral tone or the 5th tone of Chinese. Yep. But in Taiwan, they will say, 我吃饱了, 我吃饱了, right? They actually use the 4th tone on that word. So they don't pronounce it lightly, they actually explicitly pronounce that.
Yeah, exactly. That can be good and bad. For me, I found that it forced me to focus on the tones for both characters, which meant that I remembered them better. But I guess you could say that if you've forgotten the tone and you're in the mainland, it doesn't matter because it's at the end anyway, so you wouldn't have to remember it. So that can be a pro or a con, whichever way you look at it.
Right. Okay. So now, please share with us an embarrassing or a funny moment when you were learning Chinese.
When I was traveling through Guizhou, actually, I visited a minority village. So it's like a minority group in China and they've kept the village kind of like the ancient Chinese villages, like small streets, no cars, kind of have horses to get around, and like they build their own houses. So it's a really traditional village. And I went into one of the shops there and I picked up something that looked like a toy to me, but it was really nice, like really well decorated. And I just started spinning it around. And I asked like the shop owner what it's for, and he said, 念经的时候可以用这个. And that but I misheard him. I thought he said 年轻的时候可以用这个. So I thought he's saying, oh, that's for when you're young, like that's when you're a kid, you kind of play with this thing. And so I kept spinning it around like, oh, yeah, it's pretty cool. And he didn't look too happy, and he said it again, and I realized that I'd misunderstood him. And I looked up, what is Nianjing? I didn't know what that was. I looked it up in my Pleco app, and it kind of means like when you're praying. So it's kind of like a bit of a religious thing. And it was probably a bit disrespectful, but when I explained to him, like, oh, sorry, I thought you said it's for kids, 年轻的时候. And then he laughed, and it was no problem, but it was pretty embarrassing. I think my face went red there after that.
That's an interesting one. Well, now let's go to a high note. Tell us a success story, a most rewarding moment after you have become fluent in Chinese.
So the biggest success story I've had would be after coming second in the Melbourne competition for the Chinese Bridge, which is Hanyu Qiao in Chinese, and being able to attend the competition in China. There were people from 100 and something different countries over there, about 150 of us all together. And that was a really great experience, meeting people from different universities all over the world, different levels in Mandarin, very different backgrounds, different majors like engineering, arts, science, law, all kinds of backgrounds. And as a group of 150, we spent about a week together before they held the first, or before had the first couple rounds of the competition to determine who would stay on. After that, 30 people stayed on, and I was lucky enough to be part of that group. So the top 30 of us, it kind of turned into a game show. So we'd go into the TV studio, we'd be given like questions, kind of funny questions, testing us on Chinese grammar, Chinese characters, listening ability, like writing ability, just general knowledge and culture knowledge. And that was, that's an experience I would have never had if I hadn't learned Mandarin. Just to be able to, as an average person to end up on a game show is a bit of a weird thing.
Yeah.
And after we had a few rounds of that, I was lucky enough to still be staying on in the top 15. So I didn't end up winning the competition, but I got to stay until the grand final. And with the other group of people, we had like a sort of performance on stage. And, that's something I definitely would have never had if I hadn't learned Mandarin. So that's probably the biggest and most interesting experience I've had through learning Mandarin.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. So how would you compare your life before you've learned Chinese and your life after?
It's opened a lot of doors for me. Like even in terms of my engineering career, I think it's going to be very useful. There's a lot of companies that deal with China either for manufacturing or trying to break into the Chinese market. So I see that as a big part of my future career. But also in my personal life, like it's given me the chance to experience things that I wouldn't have otherwise, like the trip to Taiwan and the Chinese bridge competition in Hunan. Apart from those, I'm actually married to a Chinese woman as well. And that's, being able to have conversations in both languages so that we both are very clear on what we're talking about, be able to express ourselves very well. That's something that, that just makes our relationship that bit better as well.
Definitely. Did you meet your wife before you learned Chinese or after?
Just after I came back from Taiwan, one of my friends from university kind of introduced us to each other just at a event that we were both at. So it was after I'd already started and I could kind of have like those basic conversations and we could understand each other. But it was certainly a motivating factor to keep up the study.
Yes, definitely. So do you have a favorite city in China?
Oh, that's a good question. I've been to quite a few. I really liked Chengdu in Sichuan. Yeah, it was a really nice, not too busy, not, pretty nice weather in Chengdu. I really liked Kunming as well, down in Yunnan province.
Yes.
That's a really clean city and, it's got nice weather, nice big lake, blue sky. Well, I really liked Taipei as well over in Taiwan. That was, I spent the most time there, so I probably know the city pretty well. It's got some really nice mountains, lots of good food, and, that's really clean as well. I don't know if I could pin it down to one of them, but yeah,
They're different.
Yeah, very different.
Now, please share with us one special thing about the Chinese culture that is different to your own culture.
Probably superstitions. So, we have superstitions in sort of Western culture, but not too many people take them that seriously anymore. Like black cats are unlucky, that kind of thing. But the superstitions in Chinese, people actually take pretty seriously. Like you go to a hotel in China and if you take the lift, you'll notice that they have like a level 1, 2, 3, but then they skip level 4 and go straight to 5.
Right.
Number...
I personally haven't seen that before.
You haven't seen it? Oh, I've seen it so many places in China. Or like they'll have like banquet rooms in a restaurant and they'll have like 1, 2, 3, and then 5, or they'll have 3A. They'll skip the number 4. And that's because the number 4 in Chinese sounds very similar to the word for death. So they don't, that's a really unlucky number. You don't want to be associated with that. Mm-hmm. So for me, I found that pretty interesting. And when I was living in Taiwan, I had a friend who took these superstitions, reasonably seriously. And I realized that one of their train stations over there, or not just a train station, it's actually like a transport hub. So the train station mixed with the subway, mixed with the bus system as well, and the intercity coach. And they call it like Taipei 转运站, which means like the Taipei sort of transport interchange station. But 转运 in Chinese, apart from meaning like change of transport, it also means like change your luck. Yeah. So I asked my friend, because they're pretty big on their superstitions in language. I'm like, if you've got bad luck and you want to change your luck, can you go to this station? And she thought for a second, she's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, 转运. And then she laughed and she realized she'd never thought of it like that, but it made sense to her and she thought that was pretty funny. So
yeah,
I think
nice.
that's probably one interesting thing.
Definitely. It's interesting you picked that out. I've never heard 转运站 can be interpreted that way, but it's pretty legit.
Yeah. I mean, for example, when I was in Taiwan, it was sort of the Chinese New Year and the normal, New Year as well, from 2013 to 2014. So in Chinese, that's 2013年到2014年. And a lot of people were talking about how like the 13 to 14 is kind of like 13 14, which is
Yes.
just literally means 1314, but it sounds very similar to 一生一世, which
Yes.
literally translates as sort of one life and one world. So it's kind of like
Yes.
saying you've really got one shot in life kind of thing. That's what I feel from it. Yeah, so that was a big thing when I was there.
That's true. 13 14 sounds very similar to 一生一世, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's how it came from. There's quite a few.
Another thing I thought of there actually was there's the difference between the mainland and Taiwan. In the mainland they use pinyin. In Taiwan, nobody really knows the pinyin for any characters.
That's true.
Pinyin is the way to kind of pronounce the character. So it's, for example, ni hao would be Nihao.
Yep.
I think I got that right. In pinyin, but in Taiwan they use a different system which is called zhuyin, and they don't use the English letters at all. They use kind of it's not even a character-based thing. I think it might even come from Japanese. I'm actually not sure on the origin, but they use these other symbols to represent the letters. So it's kind of really hard if you ask someone, like, oh, how do you spell the character or how do you pronounce it? You kind of have to really listen to how they're pronouncing it. You can't ask them to spell it out in English letters. And I just kind of got used to that when I was in Taiwan, but then I met someone from Nanjing and I was riding my bike with him and I realized, I'm like, oh, what did you just say, that word? And I'm like, oh, I realized I could ask him, how do you spell that? Like, 你怎么拼这个词? And then he could say, oh, like XISHUI or whatever, something like that. And that's something I couldn't do with the local Taiwanese people. I would just have to listen very carefully to what they were saying.
That's very interesting. I never thought about that. I know Taiwan, they use 注音. They don't use pinyin. They don't type with pinyin, actually. They have their Taiwan input system.
Yeah, I've never figured out that one, to be honest. I just stick with the pinyin, and if I need to convert to the traditional characters, I'll copy and paste it into Google Translate and then select traditional characters.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a good way. Is there a tool, an app, or a website that you cannot live without in learning Chinese?
Absolutely. Right from the start, I stumbled upon Pleco. So I'd never heard of it. I'd just got a smartphone for the first time when I started learning Mandarin, which was a bit later than most people, 2013. And I think I just went to the App Store and just typed in like Chinese dictionary or something like that. And this Pleco app came up, and I thought it was a bit of a weird name, but I downloaded it and tried it with a bunch of other apps, and that one was the best by far because you can, on the Android version at least, you can just kind of hand write the character and then select it from the one that matches what you wrote, as well as put in the pinyin and any other input method, or put in the English word and get the definition. And it's got example sentences, and you can it's got even really colloquial stuff, like even some of the swear words are in the dictionary. So yeah, like really colloquial words that some Chinese people have never even heard of. You can put it into the Pleco dictionary and it'll give you a really accurate description of that word. And Chinese people they're like they'll say something and I'll be like, oh, what's that? They're like, oh no, I'm not going to tell you because it might be some bad word or something. And I'm like, oh, it's okay, I'll just look it up in the dictionary. They're like, nah, no way it's going to be in the dictionary. They wouldn't put that in there. And then it's actually in there and they're really surprised.
Nice.
Another app that I recently discovered is called Du Chinese, so DU Chinese. And I'm just using the free version, but they've got lessons ranging from beginner to advanced on a wide variety of topics. And the lessons are usually dialogues with text provided. You can choose either simplified characters or traditional characters. And you can turn the pinyin on and off, as well as the tone color marking. And there's also, if you're not sure on a word, you can just click it and it'll give you the English translation of the whole sentence, really accurate, like a nice translation. And you can also play back an audio recording. So you can test everything. You can test your reading ability, listening ability, and you can even add words to like a flashcard list if you don't know them. So that's an app that I would consider buying. I don't know how much it costs yet, but even the free version is really useful.
Cool. I'll make sure I put Pleco and Do Chinese in our show notes. Now, if you are to recommend to our listeners only one book in learning Chinese or the Chinese culture, what would that be?
Like I said, I haven't read a full book in Chinese as yet. That's my next goal. But I did find that the textbook I started off with in first year, maybe it's just because that's the first one I ever had, but I found that to be quite good, like a nice balance between sort of the written stuff and the characters and nice little tips in there. It's a little bit old. I think it was written in the late 90s, so it might not be the most relevant now, but that was called 现代中文, which is contemporary Chinese. That was produced, I think, by Beijing University. And they've got audio CDs as well, I think, and even videos as well that come along with the book. I don't know. I mean, that's something I could recommend, but I think really any sort of introductory book that's especially for beginners will give you a really good start, as long as you're kind of practicing with other people as well.
Yep, practice is very important. So now, please teach our listeners your favorite Chinese quote, phrase, or an expression.
A lot of Chinese expressions are summed up in what's called chongyu, or idioms, and they kind of simplify, like there might be some historic story about something, and it's been summarized into just 4 characters. And one of the ones that sticks with me is 笨鸟先飞, which means the stupid bird flies first. And it might not make too much sense when you first hear it, but then you got to think, if you think about it, if you've got the dumb bird flies first, or like leaves the nest first, it kind of means that, like, if you're not, I guess people would use it when they're trying to be humble, like someone compliments you on maybe achieving some success in some area, and you're like, you can just say, oh, no, like, 笨鸟先飞, like, no, I'm just a stupid bird. I just had to get out there early, otherwise, it wouldn't work out, that kind of thing. Is that how you would describe it?
Yeah, I remember back then when I was studying in China, my teacher used to say 笨鸟先飞 to some of my classmates. If you're not that smart in studying, you should put in the extra effort. You should spend more time on studying than other students so that you won't get left behind. So that is one of the usage I hear all the time for 笨鸟先飞.
Yeah, I mean that kind of makes sense, right? If you've got like a disadvantage in some area, it just means you have to kind of get out there earlier and put in more effort to make up for it. Doesn't mean that you can't succeed. It just means you've got to be committed. But yeah, like I think, like I said, a lot of people use it when they're trying to be humble. So they're actually really good at something, and people compliment them, and to be humble, they'll be like, no, I'm just the silly bird, and I had to get out early.
Yep, you can use it that way as well. So just before we let you go, Tristan, how can our listeners reach you?
If you want to contact me for any reason personally, maybe my Gmail would be best. I'll pass that on to you so you can put that up with the podcast. Sure. I've also got an Instagram if anyone's interested. Kind of just post photos related to travel or aviation or anything that I find kind of interesting. And that's my Instagram name is Aeroplanter, so AERO and PLANTER, Aeroplanter.
Got that. So I'll put that on the show note. Thank you so much, Tristan, for sharing with our listeners your journey in learning Chinese. It's been a great journey. So I'm sure many people would definitely benefit from your journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me on, Victor.
To our listeners, the show note is now available at ChineseTalkEase.com/14. TalkEase is spelled as TalkEze. Do you want to learn Chinese for free? Start your own journey to Chinese fluency with my video lessons at ChineseTalkEase.com. TalkEase is spelled as TalkEze. Also remember to join our Facebook group. Just head over to talkchinesecommunity.com. If you have enjoyed the show, please leave us a review on iTunes. Each month, I will choose one reviewer and give out a 1-year subscription to all my premium video lessons for free. That's it for now. I'll see you in the next episode.